Okay, so one of the things that that has been said about me is that I don't operate in a neutral position as the county clerk, that I show favoritism, and one of them was the incident that happened with Phil Lyman. So what happened there is they said I filed a brief with the court. I didn't file a brief, I filed a declaration. The complaint is that I was very neutral to, or impartial to, Phil Lyman when he was running for governor, as opposed to Governor Cox. So Governor Cox won in the primary, and so Phil Lyman ran as a write-in on the general election. And so Phil Lyman asked the lieutenant governor's office, what does a voter have to write on their ballot in order for it to be accepted as a write-in? And the response was they could write Phil Lyman, Natalie Clausen, any one of the combinations of those first names or last names would be sufficient to know that that's the ticket that they were voting for. And so that's the instructions that they received. That's the instructions that was given to the county clerks. But then Richard Lyman and Carol Lyman filed to run as write-ins. So that really clouded the issue as to what Lyman meant. Because Phil Lyman had received that instruction, we had received that instruction, and now this other Richard Lyman came into play. And so obviously the instruction was, well, what we said before is no longer valid. But this Richard Lyman, he wasn't campaigning. There were so many errors on his website, so there just wasn't any campaign effort for him to say he was Lyman. So there was a lawsuit with Phil Lyman and Governor Cox, and I tried to stay pretty neutral to it, but I was asked about what the county clerks had been advised to do with the writing of Lyman. So I needed some clarification on that. And so there was a lawyer that was involved in the case, and he asked me for a declaration of what we had received and what the instructions were for us. And so I submitted a declaration to the courts through this lawyer, basically stating, what does it mean if somebody writes Lyman on their ballot? Because, fine, there's Phil Lyman and then there's the lieutenant governor, but they were on the ticket, so their instruction was there has some partiality to it. And so I wanted just some neutral, impartial judgment on that. So I asked the courts to give me an impartial judgment as to what it means if somebody wrote Lyman. Luckily, it never really became really important because Richard Lyman and Carol Lyman ultimately dropped out of the race. So in the end, if someone wrote Lyman, it meant Phil Lyman. So it was just me trying to be impartial and gain that independent third-party ruling as to what Lyman meant on the writing candidate or on the ballot as a writing candidate.